Ghost Recon Wildlands is Ubisoft's biggest new installment, continuing the great action stealth military shooter series. Unlike its older brother, Rainbow Six, Ghost Recon generally takes a stealthier approach to its missions. Before I really begin talking about the game though, I want to talk about Ubisoft itself. Over the past few years, Ubisoft has become much less favored amongst gamers because of its buggy games, poor PC ports, in most cases, and generally lackluster experiences. And what I mean by that is that the formula for many of their games is pretty similar. Assassin's Creed. That isn't to say they make bad games, though. Obviously, people do like their games, that's why they're still able to make them. Personally, I don't really play many of their games anymore. I got Watch Dogs 2, but haven't put that much time into it. Anyways, let's talk about Ghost Recon. I just wanted to mention my stance, as well as the stance of many other gamers towards Ubisoft. I think that it's important to know the standards that people expect out of this game, which for many gamers, I don't think is really that high. I received a free beta code for Wildlands from Nvidia, because I own an Nvidia graphics card. I really appreciate that, because despite what I just said, I have had some interest in Wildlands. Not too much in all honesty, but some. I really enjoyed Future Soldier's campaign and weapon customization, and had hoped to see the same aspects of that game brought back into this one. In a lot of ways, they have, but Wildlands seems to fall short in many categories. Keep in mind, this is just a beta. However, the game's release date is March 7th, just barely over a month after the beta was released. Therefore, this isn't really a beta for getting feedback. It's a demo for their game. They might tweak a few things here and there, but this beta is meant to build hype for the game, not allow the developers to improve upon gameplay. I'm sure some of the bugs will be fixed, but I doubt that the actual game will be much different upon release. I also want to say that I played on the regular difficulty for most of this critique. I would have played on the realistic difficulty, but wanted to experience the game the way it was meant to be in order to properly form my opinions. Also, there are timestamps in the description in case you want to watch the video in sections, or maybe if you want to watch it in a specific order. So with that being said, let's jump into the Wildlands. There isn't too much to say here. There's a drug overlord whose forces are conflicting with others. It's a typical drug cartel storyline, and from what I played, it doesn't do much to stand out. At least in Future Soldier, you were given advanced technologies that made you feel like you were truly in a futuristic setting. But that's not really a complaint, because Wildlands is meant to be modern day. This game tried to build up its characters and its demos on YouTube. This squad is the best recon squad from America.
Hundreds of Bolivians have died from Santa Blanca's bullets. Where will my hundreds of soldiers come from?
As Americans, we aren't here, remember? These soldiers are the best covert ops team our country has to offer.
They've done operations before where they were never discovered, but it changed the tides of battle drastically. I don't care much for the characters though. Of course, they're military figures, so it's typical that their personalities are more like cardboard than actual people. There are some dialogue exchanges that make them feel human, but they're few and far in between. At their best, the characters are just good enough to make you interested in the conflict. At their worst, they're downright boring. The first cutscene we see, which is also the first thing you see when booting up the campaign, is just exposition being blurted to you. This wouldn't be so bad, but the camera movements are like an indie film student trying to keep the attention of their audience. It wobbles so much that I can't even focus on what's being told to me. Instead, I'm wondering who at Ubisoft thought it was a good idea to implement this camera when we're essentially just looking at a screen. The lip sync is pretty awful. Laughable is probably a better term. The strange thing is, this is mostly just in the case of the cutscenes. You know, pre-rendered cutscenes that the developer actually worked directly with. But when in-game, the lip sync is decent. It's not great, but it won't distract you from what's said between characters. Speaking of characters, this is where the game really starts to shine.
Hard being someone who doesn't officially exist.
Ghost Recon Future Soldier was praised pretty heavily for its weapon customization. Every part of the weapon could be customized from the stock to the trigger and the side rail to the ammo. This was a feature I'm sure everyone wanted to see return in Wildlands. I'm extremely happy that it's back, even though the beta heavily restricts its use. What I really want to talk about though is the character itself. Before you even really begin the game, you can customize your character. You choose male or female, their face, clothes, and accessories. I was pretty surprised about this, but truthfully, Ubisoft is actually pretty good at making customizable characters in their games, aside from The Division, but I actually think it's one of the things they're best at. First, you can customize the head. This also changes the skin color. You can customize your shirt, your vest, your pants, shoes, gloves, ghillie suit, etc. I thought this part was really cool, and it's a great way for players to really feel like they have a unique character. You can't change the voice or the name, but I completely understand why. The game has a set story with set dialogue, and to record it in all different voices would be costly and time consuming. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I should also say that the character customization for the aesthetics is purely just that. It doesn't really change anything in-game. If you give your character one backpack or another, it doesn't change anything. Another thing that further allows you to customize your character is the leveling up system. You find skill points throughout the world, or you can earn them by gaining experience. Skill points allow you to unlock new abilities, which start out basic, but get much more interesting along the way. But what really makes the leveling up system unique is the fact that it requires more than just skill points. You've teamed up with rebels in the area, and their supplies are shared with you. Therefore, some skills you level up will require some of their supplies. The thing is, you need to get the supplies for them. One of the supplies is oil, which you'll need for specific skills. So, you do the missions for them in order to gain both the skill points as well as the oil. I think it's a pretty unique system. It's been done in other games, but to see Ubisoft implement some sort of in-depth skill tree is a refreshment. Speaking of the rebel faction, different factions will react to you based on your actions. Now, this isn't perfect, but it's a nice inclusion. During some of my playtime with the beta, I killed rebel soldiers, my allies, just to see what their reaction would be. I wasn't entirely impressed, to be honest. I killed 2 rebels in front of a third. He didn't respond, didn't care, and from what I could tell, I didn't receive any sort of negative reaction from the faction as a whole. You're not supposed to kill civilians in this game, something Ubisoft puts in a lot of their games, but strangely enough, you can kill their livestock and they won't care. Seriously, I killed every single cow that was in that field. Maybe it was a glitch. I can't really tell since it's a beta, but who knows. Maybe Ubisoft didn't think to add this feature. I have a few issues with the NPCs in this game, which I've had since seeing footage of the game that Ubisoft revealed on their YouTube channel. I'll get more into that later, but right now I just want to say that civilians around different camps and fortresses don't react to you. I mean, you're an American soldier, a foreigner to this country, walking around with guns on your back and a gun in your hands, and they just don't care. I mean, sure, once bullets start flying, they'll care, but you'd think there'd be some sort of reaction from them. I don't know.
We got a Sicario, over by the helo.
Since it was announced, Wildlands developers have been boasting about its dynamic day-night cycle, as well as their weather cycle. Now, I don't have a single issue with these features. In fact, I welcome them, because they do a good job. The only thing is, these features have been included in games since all the way back in the mid-2000s. Just look at the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. Now, the game doesn't look as nice, but it has a day-night cycle, as well as rain effects. So I was confused as to why Ubisoft was really trying to sell us on this feature. Truth is, and I'll get to this a little bit more later, the weather system actually does affect gameplay, just not as dramatically as you'd think. But I will say that the weather and day-night cycles look great. They feel great too, as if actual progress is being made from day to day. The environment itself is pretty gorgeous. There's an abundance of grass, which I greatly appreciate. Even the distant land looks really pretty, and I found some of the best views while I was in the helicopter. There are some flaws, however. I noticed a lot of texture pop in during my playtime, and it was bad. As I was driving, the ground refused to fully load. By the time a section of ground had loaded its textures, I was already gone. There was also one instance in which I found that the ground hadn't loaded the area I had already been in for a while. It loaded when I first showed up, but for whatever reason, unloaded itself. To many people, texture popping probably isn't the worst thing. I mean, I don't really mind it upon first entering an area, but even I have to admit, it's awful in this game. I even turned the settings down to medium, but still found the popping to be frequent. It's a shame, because the game's textures can actually be quite pretty. Speaking of the settings, Wildlands has a great settings menu. When you're looking at the different options you can tweak, there's a great visual representation off to the side that shows you exactly what it's doing. It wasn't until I saw this that I asked myself, why isn't this done in every game? It seems so basic that it should be a necessity. So props to you, Ubisoft, for doing this. You hear that? That's the only applause you're gonna get for this game. Now, I know this isn't the first game to do this, but not many games follow this example. Also, I don't know if consoles will have as many settings to configure as PC users. And finally, the effects in the game are pretty good. Gunfire lights up and looks great. Dust shoots out in all directions when you shoot items. Blood spurts and it looks good enough. The water effects are great, including the rain, and the lighting is pretty fantastic too. A feature I really enjoy is the fact that your vision adjusts to the light. It's dynamic, and I like that. The open world is pretty large. Even the section you get from the beta will take a decent amount of exploring to see everything. And when looking at the map, you can zoom out and see just how expansive it is. It's not the biggest map in an open world game, but it's fairly large. You have markers that show where objectives are. You can set waypoints and discover new towns or villages. There are stronghold type areas for you to infiltrate, and lots of vehicles. This game does truly feel like a sandbox in a lot of ways. Earlier I mentioned that I would come back to the dynamic day, night, and weather cycles. Yes, they affect gameplay. Obviously it'll be harder to detect at night, and even more so if it's raining. I like this feature because a lot of games that do have dynamic weather don't really implement it towards stealth. Wildlands should be commended for this because it adds another layer of strategy for the player. Unfortunately, and once again I'll get into this later, that strategy can fall very flat. The open world has a lot of locations for you to go to. The only problem is there isn't much to do in them. Sure, you can discover new weapon crates and supplies for the rebels, but the game, once again, feels like Ubisoft shoving a lot of collectibles in the world to substitute actual content. I think Watch Dogs 2 is extremely guilty of this, but at least Wildlands has a very unique and beautiful environment. Sections of the world are rated by difficulty. You start out in the middle area, which is the easiest. The farther you go out in any direction, the harder the game becomes. I hope that this means that there are more outposts and strongholds in those areas to give players more opportunity for stealth missions. I'm sure that this is the case, probably along with some harder factions. I can only hope though. Overall, I like the scale of the open world. I like that it's based on difficulty, a basic feature that many RPGs can't even do well. Not to say that Wildlands is an RPG, because it isn't. I just wanted to point out that the difficulty scaling is a welcome inclusion. I hope that upon release, the game has more put into its world, because right now it feels a little empty. For obvious reasons, this is going to be the largest chunk of the video. I have a lot to say about Wildlands gameplay. A lot of it is good, but even more of it is bad. I'm pretty opinionated about these things, so there's a good chance you'll disagree. If that's the case, feel free to tell me why you disagree in the comments. I'd like to hear your opinions. The very first mission has you drive to it, which was simple enough. The driving feels good and controls pretty well. Vehicles feel like they have weight and they'll react to the road, depending on how bumpy it is. Damage done to vehicles is also pretty neat to look at. Once you arrive to the first area, the game tells you about stealth. I think this game is meant to be played with more stealth than combat, since this is how they introduce it, but you can play it however you want. And in this first section, the stealth felt great. I learned how to use my drone and scout the area, how to tag enemies, and how to knock them out. I then learned how to use the sync shot, of which I only got one to start out. I had my teammate take out one of the soldiers and then I quickly shot the other one. No one else in the area had been alarmed, so I moved through. Teammates will follow you as long as you have them set to do so, and I noticed that one of my squad members phased through an animal. Not really a big deal though. After seeing a tiny bit how the stealth played, I accidentally entered combat. I was trying to mess around with the controls and ended up throwing a grenade that alerted everyone else, including my target. I think this was good though, because I got to experience a little bit of combat, which is admittedly really fun in the game. My only complaint is that the cover system is weird to try and control, because there's no specific button for it, so if you want to face a certain direction, you have to struggle with your character. I killed the last few guys and finished the mission by interrogating my target. Interrogations are cool because some of them take place in the middle of a hostile base, so you have to move your target to a safe location with enough time to fully interrogate them. You can also end the interrogation whenever you want in case an enemy walks by, which is a nice addition. After this first mission, a few more open up for you to try. I went on to my second mission, which is where I started to see just how clearly broken the stealth mechanics in the game were. I started out by reconning the area with my drone, and then made my way down the mountain. My teammates derped their way down too, following behind me, But because I'm not an idiot, I told them to stay behind so that I could move through the environment without having to worry about them. The first enemy I came across almost detected me through the cover. You could make the argument that my gun is sticking out a bit above my head, but that's not something I can control as the player. And this cover is clearly meant for you to hide behind. But no, he detects me anyway, then starts shooting at my teammates who I left way far behind me. I was so angry at this that I tried blowing myself up to start over, but a frag grenade didn't kill me. The second one did though. I started over at a pretty convenient checkpoint, killed that guy, and got through farther into the area. On a side note, why isn't there a restart from last checkpoint option in the start menu? At this point, it was darker out, so I was harder to detect. I moved up the first building and spotted a guy on the couch. If you were willing to argue about me getting spotted with the first guy, then I dare you to come up with an argument for this. I shoot the first guy in the head. Once. This alerts his teammate, who I then shot in the body. Yes, he let out a sound, but most enemies do make sounds when they die. It's not meant to be heard by other enemies though. But yet, somehow, outside the building, down on ground level, and across the street, someone heard him. I mean, what the hell? They didn't exactly know where I was, but they began investigating the place. The two bodies from earlier disappeared after about 30 seconds or so. I don't know where the hell they went, but since enemies were looking for me, I decided to go to the roof and wait to see if they'd come up. And yes, they did. A guy showed up, turned around to look for me, and for that argument about my gun sticking out, what do you call that? Because I call it bullshit. I know it seems like I'm getting angry, and that's because I am. It's just a video game, so honestly, who actually cares? But it gets much worse than this. Eventually, I kill some more people and then leave the place. I stopped caring about it and just bailed after fighting a lot of other dudes. My squad shot at them too, but I don't think we ever really killed them all. Then I moved on to the next location. This is where the awful stealth mechanics just became ridiculously horrible. This location is a small area, just a few guys with 3 or so on patrol around the perimeter. I shoot this first guy in the head and no one sees him. Sweet, no harm done. No one heard or saw what had happened. The second guy showed up, but I killed him too. Now remember earlier, when the bodies disappeared? That happens again. This first guy's body disappears. I can no longer see it. It doesn't exist. But as a second enemy shows up, just casually walking as patrol, he becomes alerted to the dead body that no longer exists. And I can't even say that this is just a glitch, because with all the time I've spent playing the beta, every body has disappeared. This is something that Ubisoft actually put into the game. But then, why can enemies still see the bodies? How is that fair? He trots on over and I take him out, no harm done. But what if I was playing on the hardest difficulty, and he managed to alert the rest of the camp? How fair would that have been? I'd have probably died, seeing as just 2 or 3 shots will kill you on the ghost difficulty. But enough of that place. The stealth mechanics suck. They work some of the time, but not all of the time. I don't understand, because the next place I went to, I managed to sneak through with no harm done. Everything was easy peasy. So these encounters I've had with the AI just don't make sense to me. It's pretty ridiculous. Let's take a break from stealth. We'll come back to it a little bit later, but for now, let's move on to some of the other things that the game has to offer. Helicopters and planes. Yes and yes. Flying in the game is very fun. I think that the planes are more fun to fly than the helicopters, but that might just be because I came pretty close to crashing. The vehicles feel like they have weight, and because you have to constantly adjust the speed and height you're going, these vehicles fly differently from any other game. At least, as far as I know. I haven't played GTA 5 yet. The NPC interactions are pretty weird. They'll phase through you, but that isn't that big of a deal. It feels like a lot of characters and objects can phase around in this game, but maybe Ubisoft was going for some mysterious sci-fi element. No? Oh. Okay. Objects around the world have their own physics to them, which I think is really stupid. That means that if you're trying to sneak around, you can accidentally kick a chair or a bucket over and alert the enemy. Not only is that not fair, but it's not realistic. If my shoulder bumps a chair in real life, it doesn't topple over and roll around on the ground like a person on fire. Maybe Ubisoft was trying to make players aware of the environment, but they could have done it much better in my opinion. The last thing I'll talk about specifically with the gameplay is that there are some invisible walls. I never failed or messed up because of them, but it was at least funny to see it. I feel like invisible walls are so old school, they shouldn't even exist anymore. But hey, it wasn't that big of a deal. So yeah, the gameplay is very back and forth for me. On one hand, I think that the stealth is really fun, the one time it actually worked. Combat works and it's satisfying to shoot your enemies, but the mechanics, especially for stealth, are just so broken that it becomes extremely difficult to enjoy sometimes. I can only imagine someone being halfway through a mission in the hardest section of the game, on the hardest difficulty, only to have some bullshit detection go off and get them killed. The last real section of the video is going to be about the thing I feel Ubisoft hyped up the most around this game, the squad. Let's see just how tactical and intelligent they really are. First and foremost, the squad's characters are boring. As I played later into the beta, I heard them have a discussion about torture, but it didn't really establish any character. It just made my one squad member sound like a psychopath, which one of the other squad mates even pointed out. Not really the type of soldier-to-soldier bonding I want to experience in the game. And to be honest, I really couldn't tell you any of their names. I don't remember my own character's name. But hey, who cares? I never really use the squad AI. I use them for sync shots because the entire mechanic is broken. I mean seriously, my squad member, who was down the entire mountain, just killed the cartel troop in front of me. I used the sync shot ability to clear some snipers out of the Unidad base. Seriously, it's the only thing the AI teammates are good for. This isn't really a negative or positive thing, but your teammates will also just teleport magically into your vehicles. I would criticize this, but I honestly wouldn't want to wait around for some stupid AI to try and get in the car before I can leave, especially Ubisoft AI. So actually, I'm happy that they decided to just make them teleport. But if Ubisoft was willing to let your teammates teleport, then why on earth would they let them get detected by enemies? Having your teammates teleport into the car with you is Ubisoft's way of saying, yeah, our AI are stupid, so here's an easy way for you to move around the world. They know that the AI is stupid. It's awful. Just look at this footage of my squad mate crawling around even outside the area I told him to go, only to be caught and blow our cover.
Tangos are marked. What's the word?
Ponte la mano en la cara. Si hay para todos, pues. Me vale madre. Él y tu familia se van a joder. Entiéndelo, me los voy a chingar.
¿Qué hacen aquí, gringo?
Güey. The lieutenant's trying to escape.
Ah, shit, we've been spotted.
He sure can take a lot of hits though. The only upside to his stupidity is that I could use him as a distraction, sneak around the farm, and kill some of the other cartel soldiers. That's it. Like I said before, the stealth is broken. And letting your stupid AI teammates get caught by enemies is another way that it's broken. I don't understand why it's so difficult to make AI these days. I mean, The Last of Us made it so that your teammates were never detected by enemies, even if they were right in front of them. And yeah, it looked ridiculous, but it saved gamers a lot of headaches. I don't understand the choices Ubisoft is making. How haven't they learned from their past games?
Hang tight, I'm heading your way.
So here we are. The end of the video as well as the critique. I'm gonna say one more time, remember that this is the beta, but I'm also gonna say that the game comes out in just a few weeks. This stuff won't be fixed by then. I could see possibly Ubisoft fixing the texture pop-ins, but the AI wouldn't be able to be fixed in time. It's a shame. Future Soldier was one of my favorite tactical shooters. Wildlands doesn't live up to it for me. So while the game does a lot right, such as the open world, customization options, and combat mechanics, It does much more wrong. I eventually cranked up the difficulty to the hardest difficulty and tried playing it, but I couldn't. The stealth was still broken and got me killed several times. I played cautiously, but died constantly. I wasn't really expecting much out of this game. Yes, I had hopes that it would be a blast and return to form with Future Soldier, but I never got hyped. And I think it's pretty obvious that this game didn't receive as much love as it should have. I'm sure a lot of people who worked on the game are passionate about it, but because of deadlines and probably Ubisoft corporate, they can't make the game the best it can be. Wildlands was announced around the same time as the Assassin's Creed movie and Watch Dogs 2. On television, Assassin's Creed trailers were everywhere. I can't tell you how many times I saw Michael Fassbender's face on my television. And on YouTube, Watch Dogs 2 was heavily promoted. These two things were what Ubisoft was really trying to shove in our face. The only promotional content I've seen on Wildlands is the gameplay walkthroughs that the developers did on their channel, and they weren't even promoted that much. I could have been looking in the wrong places. Maybe there was a lot of advertising for the game, but I just haven't seen it as blatantly as I've seen Assassin's Creed and Watch Dogs 2. This game has the potential to be great. I want to see it come out with patches and updates that fix the issue it has. The game comes out in less than a month, so I don't really expect it to be ready by then. But hey, maybe in a couple months it'll work great and be fun as hell. Until then though, I'm gonna have to pass. I want to thank you guys for watching this video. I know it was a longer one, and it was another critique, but like always, these videos are fun to make. I enjoy writing the script, getting the footage, and sharing my thoughts with you. So thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.
And I'm the Associate Development Test Lead on Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands. Now on behalf of the whole development team, we want to wish you a warm welcome to this closed beta. Today, we are extremely excited to share with you the game that we've been working on for more than 4 years now. More than 4 years now.